Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll start. As you know, this is a series of lectures. This is the almost the last one. We still have one more to do. And tonight we'll speak of Jean-Paul Lemieux. After what I said last time about Cosgrove, you may expect that I will treat Lemieux like the staunch nationalist painter with, of course, nationalism now understood in a very narrow sense of Quebec nationalism. In fact, it's true that he was perceived that way. One part of his fame, I think, was linked to this type of interpretation. Even people were calling him the peintre québécois par excellence and things like that. And you must know that this is an interpretation that he refused himself. He says, very bluntly on this, he says, I don't understand why people make of me le peintre québécois par excellence. He says, what I paint could be painted in the West, in Norway, in Russia. It's not linked to a specific place like just here. And you know that politically also, Lemieux did a few declarations in the newspaper saying that he's not a separatist, that he doesn't want to be associated with this political opinion. And also, maybe to stress that, the fact that he had an immense success when his work was presented in 1974 in Russia and then in Prague. And people were very enthusiastic, and we know that not only in general words, if you want, but the book of visitors that were put in the exhibition have been not only noted, but also translated. And it's amazing to see all the comments that he got, as if people really in Russia and in Czechoslovakia at the time could recognize themselves in the painting of Lemieux. So, no, I will not defend Lemieux as a kind of nationalist Québécois painter tonight. I will proceed differently. I would start with, he's a complex man, of course, otherwise why to speak of people who are too simple. And in order to present him to you, I would start with one little episode, if you want, a little event, in which he's involved in a kind of unexpected way. The event I want to mention is an exhibition, and by the way, this is the way also that in my research, if you want, I met Lemieux, because I'm rather known like somebody who works on Bordua, and the automatist, and all this, the fortes, and Lemieux was considered a little bit by this group of people like, if not an enemy, but somebody of the other camp, let's say, of the other side. And so I was a little bit suspicious of him, and I began to make the history of the automatist, and then suddenly you will see how he appeared in that story. The event that I'm mentioning is an exhibition that took place in Galerie Antoine, a little gallery in Montreal. It was rather, if I understood well, what the people described me at the time, rather decorateur type of premises in which you could frame your painting and things like that. Not really an art gallery like we will understood it. But anyway, the automatist made some contact with the owner, and they succeeded to present there an exhibition. You see there two photos taken during the vernissage, and their exhibition was called La Matière Chante, the matter sings. A little bit obscure title, in which you could have the very well-known automatist painter like, let's say, Fernand Leduc, Pierre Gauvreau, Jean-Paul Mousseau, but also some representing of a new generation like Rita Le Tendre, like people that were Ulysse Comtois, who were less known at the time, were the younger people, and they were also presented there. And finally, you had few very unknown painters, some of them apparently coming from Quebec City. And in Montreal, of course, always what comes from Quebec City is always unknown. They never forgive us for that, but anyway. You had people like Edmund Hallin, let's say, was there, Suzanne Rivard, the daughter of Antoine Rivard, was a politician at the time, and an unknown guy completely was called Paul Bloin, that nobody knew, but who put beside his signature ARCA, meaning Associated Member of the Royal Society of Canada. Okay, give some respect to him. The exhibition was defined by people like Claude Gauvreau, and in the way he described which type of work they will keep there, it's interesting because you will see exactly what these people were wanting at the time. It says, the objective of this exhibition is to present a group of plastic works clearly cosmic in intent. I recognize cosmic, yeah, yeah, we need a definition indeed. And receivable for this exhibition, all works deliberately done under the sign of the accident. These works are habitually called automatist in Canada, surrational almost everywhere else, abstract expressionists in America. Okay, this is interesting because at the time, Bordua was already in New York, and he heard, of course, of the abstract expressionism, and he began to think that what we were doing here in Quebec as automatists was in fact very close to what Pollock or Motherwell or Klein were doing in the States at the same time. That's why they make this kind of connection there. Sure enough, you need some intuition, goes on the text, to be able to detect if a work is cosmic or not, eligible or not, if it reflects the universal chaos or the universal harmony. But this problem will be solved, says the text, because Bordua himself will come in Montreal. He lived in New York at the time, in 1954, and he will come explicitly to choose the works that will be presented to that show, in that show. And indeed, we have some photos of Bordua doing exactly that. This is him that you see there in the two photos, choosing works, looking at them, eliminating some of them. The guy who's behind him is Guévillot, who unfortunately died now, but who was certainly very open-minded, very close to Bordua also in terms of ideas and interest in painting. And not only that, the regulation permitted also to the artists to assist to the seance of choice by Bordua. You see that if they were refused, well, they could see him choosing their painting or not. And here you see a painter who finally exhibited there, who's called Jean Gauguin, or Gauguin, if you want, on the guy with a pipe there. And you see him again in the other photo, but behind him, the painting who is there, and gives you an idea also of the type of painting who was presented there, was a Fernand Leduc painting. It was called La Voie et ses obstacles, the way and its obstacle, if you want, La Voie et ses embûches, a painting of 53, well, a recent painting of Fernand Leduc, who was chosen by Bordua and presented à la matière chante. Okay, so the critics were, of course, eager to know how Bordua will react to the new talents that were presented there. And for instance, one wrote, people were waiting with impatience at Bordua's reaction to the works of the second generation of painters in the school that he created here, you see. And he says Bordua was much impressed by the freshness of these young talents, and he saw in their works a stronger liberation, a greater control of the problem their senior had to deal with. So everything was going well. The critic was positive, maybe except some caricature, of course, always people who have take advantage of a title like La Matière Chante pour make something funny. The little guy who was presented there is Bordua, of course, and the whole one, it says à l'exposition, Cré bateau, j'entends rien. I listen, but I hear nothing. Of course, La Matière Chante, you should hear something, and without, and he's there with the... Okay, so you have also this kind of bad critique. Okay, La Matière Chante could have nothing to do with what I will speak if it was not that two painters in Quebec, Monsieur Aline and the Paul Bloin that I was mentioning before, decided to trick Bordua and to send him two paintings done in completely without any earnestness, if you want, completely just for fun of it, to see if they will be accepted by Bordeaux, if its supposedly impeccable judgment could be fooled. And of course, Paul Bloin was Jean-Paul Lemieux. And so one of the two painters, Edmond Haline and Jean-Paul Lemieux, sent these fake work, if you want, in the style of the automatist, and got accepted. So they were very, very happy. And one was called Ça arrive dans les meilleures familles. It happens in the best family, number one. And Aline, who did that, was the son of a judge. I guess he knew what was a good family. and the title of the work by Lemieux was L'Oiseau Rock, the rock bird or something. And Lemieux had certainly, this title was not chosen just whimsically like this. He had an intent behind. Maybe some of you know the story of Sinbad the Sailor, in which this oiseau rock is so important. And indeed, it comes from a very, very long tradition. You have it in India, in particular. And l'oiseau rock is always, or ruh in Arabic, it will be always presented fighting the naga. Naga will be the serpent, but sometimes even the elephant. And you do have representation, pictorial representation, in which you see this huge bird taking an elephant in his claws like this and bringing it in the heaven and obscuring the sun. This is important, of course, Lemieux wanting to obscure the Bordeauxian sun by sending this false automatist painting. So they were very, you would say, well, can we see this painting? Well, what we know, it is that I don't know what happened with the Aline painting, which is represented here on the right side. The Lemieux have been saved. I know that from his daughter that told me that recently. Oh, it's an horrible painting. I said, don't throw it away. I need it badly. I want to see it. And she wanted to get rid of it, I guess. But no, Lemieux have still kept this painting, and they were reproduced, and that's why I can show you these two black and white slides. They were reproduced in a magazine that's called L'Autorité. Because what happened, of course, after that they were accepted and exhibited in the La Matière Chante exhibition, one writer and painter also of Quebec City, who's called Claude Pichet, published in the newspaper of Montreal, of course, an article in which he revealed what happened. And he says Bordeaux was supposed to have a judgment who are absolutely impeccable, was fooled by two painters of Quebec. They are this one, and they reproduce, of course, the painting. Bordeaux was not taking it too badly. I have proof of this. You see him here laughing, smiling. But what happened after that? There was a huge polemic in the newspaper between this Claude Pichet, who was a friend of Lemieux, and a student of Lemieux, and then a friend of his. Claude Pichet also ended up his career in the National Gallery. He was in Ottawa for a long time. And he also is a painter. I will show you one of his work later on. But so between Claude Pichet and Claude Gauvreau. And Gauvreau, of course, was a poet, an automatist poet, very close to Bordeaux. And the polemic in those days, you have no idea at what extreme they could go. For instance, Claude Gauvreau called Pichet le morpion régionaliste. Well, this I don't dare to translate. Something like the regionalist crab or something. Absolutely, things that you could lose a lot of money today, I guess, in libel or things like that. At the time, these things were published like that. And Claude Pichet calling the automatistes les boy scouts de Monsieur Bordeaux. Horrible. Of course, the issue there is how come that Bordeaux could make that mistake, you see, for Claude Gauvreau. And the argument goes that way. I will not give you all the details because it's so complicated. The argument goes like way. If Lemieux wanted to make fun of Bordeaux, then he is in unconscious where really creating the work. When, in the contrary, he paints what he wants to paint, he's too conscious of it, and then the painting is no good. This was the argument of Claude Gouraud, saying that the humor, the intention of humor, created a specific, let's say, context in which the unconscious of Lemieux or of Aline could express itself finally in a good work, you see, meaning that this is the only good work that he ever did. In fact, Pichet also he quotes Lemieux describing the way he did the painting. And this is interesting also because, of course, all this is done. You have to understand that it's a big tradition between Quebec and Montreal to play jokes like this. We do that all the time among French Canadians. I don't know where it comes from, but it's a fact. We always jouer des tours, always trying to get the other. And so Lemieux described his technique this way. See, I took some gouache, some ink, and some oil paint, and with a shudder quivering, I threw few Alouette tobacco grains and waited. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, thrown more briskly. What a delight, the creative impulse. And finally, few feathers of some local birds. And it is at this very instant that the accident happened, L'Oiseau Rock was born. I guess the feathers did the work, to add few feathers, make l'oiseau, make l'oiseau rock. Anyway, so as I told you, Bordeaux took it. Okay, why then? Okay, this is, let's say, the event seen from the point of view of Montreal. But why the people in Quebec were tricky enough to do that, and what was their real motivation? Well, you know that Jean-Paul Lemieux at the time was teaching art at the School of Fine Arts of Quebec City. That was the equivalent in Quebec that we have here in Montreal. And Pichet and all Suzanne Rivard, Aline, all this have been his students. And he was not, of course, contested as much as Maillard have been in the École des Beaux-Arts of Montreal in 1945, like I told you last time. I explained that last time, with Abba Maillard and all this. So, but he had some critic, let's say, for instance, from Marcel Ferron, who was one of his students also in Quebec. And I show you a painting that, without title, but of 1948, so about the time when she was a student of Lemieux and beginning to be more interested to be with the automatists in Montreal. She made the transition between both. And Ferron spoke of the lectures of Lemieux like being too traditional or not open enough to modern art. And indeed, we could imagine the teaching of Lemieux through some of his writing. You will see why I put that on the screen there, because, for instance, he, in an article of 1939, he was already dismissing surrealism and abstract art as a kind of type of painting that he didn't want to encourage among his students. He says, for example, let us mention surrealism, a derivative of cubism, which is not a very good art history, but anyway, see what he says, and of Odilon Redon art, renewed by the Chirico. Okay, Dali is today his high priest, so that's why I took a Dali painting on the left, who is, as you can see, it's an apparition of a dish and a face. Also, you see two eyes here, mouth, but also you can read it as a dish. And perceptive people will see also a dog there. Do you see it? No? Yes? The head is here. The collar. And then the back. And so you have a kind of what Dali called a double image, but here it's a kind of triple image, in fact. You have three different things. And, okay, so for Lemieux, this is... Dali is the high priest, and it is morbid and unhealthy art, he says. Typical of our troubled times, a search for the unconscious images. We could also mention, he continued, abstract art, and I thought of, to put a Mondrian painting of a composition in red blue and yellow, like you can see. Where he says a degeneracy of cubism, combination of colors for color's sake, of form for form's sake, without any care of the subject matter, sophistication of a decadent society. So if something of that passed through the teaching of Lemieux, which is possible, of course, this was his opinion, and it's opinion that he have repeated many times, not only at the time. You could imagine that young students who were curious of other style and what was happening in Paris and in New York could have find him a little bit retardataire, kind of dépassé or something. And the other thing also that happened at the time, it is the appearance on the scene in Quebec City of Marcel Barbeau. Barbeau was one of the staunch automatists of the group of Bordua, and this is two pictures. One is a kind of charcoal, and the other is an oil paint without title that he exhibited in Quebec at the time, almost 1 year before La Matière Chante. And not only Barbeau is there and showing this type of work, but also beginning to make contact with students in the School of Fine Arts. So all this, I think, created the context in which Lemieux decided to react. He decided to say, okay, I cannot let these things go like this. I have to show my own students and maybe to defend my own students from the influence of the automatists. I will make a trick and I will make fun of Bordua, and they will detach themselves of this trend. The other thing also, finally, it is that the La Matière Chante coincide with the timid but nevertheless real essay of a group of painters from Quebec to exhibit for the first time in Montreal. And they show in all places at La Librairie Tranquille. La Librairie Tranquille, this is the place where Refus Global, the manifesto of Bordua, was launched in 1948. So in the same place, Tranquille, who had is the name of the man, it's Henri Tranquille. He's still living. It's a charming old fellow, always full of stories to tell and all that. You remember everything. And he was also very open in his taste, I would say. He would show whoever wanted to be. I don't have the exact painting of these people, but I can show you a few examples of what they were showing at this, and you will see the contrast. For instance, this is the Claude Pichet painting. It's called, I think, something like Black Furs, and it's of 1956, so just a year after, a year and a half after the exhibition, but probably in the same style that what he presented in Montreal at the time. So this is the Claude Pichet, of course, who is friend of Lemieux and revealed what Lemieux did, for instance. Of Aline, at the time, okay, Aline is known now for a much different type of work, but at the time he was painting rather sweet, still life, like you see on the left, or portrait, like you see on the right. Maybe influenced a little bit by de Tonnancourt and here by Lemieux, I don't know. Well, he's a young painter at the time, but he's certainly a figurative painter. He's not yet abstract and not yet neo-figurative, like he will be much later through the influence of pop art and something else. And finally, another painter that was represented there and was a little bit forgotten today, but in my opinion was rather good, is Suzanne Bergeron. And this is the painting it represents, it's semi-abstract if you want. It represents boats or with sailboat, little yacht and things in a port. And this painting is at the National Gallery, but it's not shown in the, no more shown as it was before. It's in the reserve, let's say, today. Okay, so then let's make just a little bit of reflection about Lemieux' attitude in all this. Here's a man who is able to fool another painter by creating a fake automatist painting. And I start with this. I said, okay, a man who is interested to lie or to deceive is also interested by the truth. It is as if this is the other side of his interest. And also this kind of attitude that he will have, you will see, I think the first attitude that you can clearly define in Lemieux is irony. And this is very important because it's kind of key to whatever he will do after. When you are ironical, you give the impression that you have with your enemy opinion. You can fake even to be with him. And then, of course, it's a way to criticize the other, but in a way, a gentle one, with more intelligence, with more, instead of a kind of a brutal confrontation with the other. And I think it's what Lemieux sensed in this first manner, particularly. It is that the Quebec at the time were not ready to a real frontal attack on whatever aspect that he would find to be needed to be changed or needed to be improved, especially about the oppressive Catholic religion that you have in Quebec at the time. Contrary to Bordeaux, will denounce it and will say that Catholicism is the closed door of human fraternity or things like that. This is nothing to keep your job in a school at the time, this type of topos. But Lemieux will do it more subtly in a way. You will have a criticism also of the religion oppression, if I can call it that way, but through irony, not directly like it is. And okay, so I will start with this, with few of his paintings, in which you will see a little bit how he have proceeded. Lemieux have two styles in a way, and this is the early Lemieux are less known than the one you may have in mind when you came here. But they are important because you will see, again, we will find a type of attitude which is coherent with the attitude that I was describing before, like to deal with fakery or to deal with deception, and now with kind of similar type of detachment with what we said. Okay, the painting is called Lazare, or Lazarus, if you want, and what you see, it's a kind of open church in which the priest who is here is giving a sermon to the community who is in the church. And in the back here somewhere, you see probably what he's speaking about. It is the resurrection of Lazarus, and Christ is represented here in a kind of modern suit with short hair, like if he wanted to modernize the story of the gospel. And in the back, you see here a parachute, another one. So meaning that because of the date of this painting, it was 41, we are in the war at the time. So if I understood well, more or less what is the main topic here, it is that the priest is giving a sermon on Lazarus and maybe creating a kind of hope that all the death that the war is creating, it's not the end of all hope. There will be a resurrection like Christ could resurrect Lazarus. But on the other hand, you see on the side here, the reality, I would say, the things that the fate of Lazarus cannot be the fate of everybody. Most of us will die. We don't have anybody who will resurrect us. And so this is, I guess, the ironical aspect of Lemieux in this. This is not the best way to solve the problem of the war. The best way is to attack Hitler and to win the war, and not to just go to religion and to be told this type of mythology, if you want. So you see why I call it this kind of ironical type of picture, because in a way, he do it gently. At first sight, you could say, well, he agree with what is represented there. This is documentary, but it's not really. And in fact, it's no more a religious painting, let's say, than the famous Gauguin painting of Vision After the Sermon. Of a painting of 1886, in which Gauguin also have said quite bluntly, he says, okay, I represented here the community of these Breton women, and here in the other, you have a tree who divide the picture in two parts. In the other part there, I represent what they see in their imagination after the sermon that they have heard before. So Gauguin have the pretension like this to enter in the religious mind of these people and to illustrate it as best as he could, as he think that they were imagining the scene that the vicar probably have alluded to. There it's not, of course, Lazarus, it's the the fight of the angel with Jacob, and it's an element of the Old Testament that was quoted probably in the sermon of the vicar, and Gauguin make the subject of his painting with this part of the Bible. This painting belongs to an epoch, and I would say Lemieux also in a certain way, in which at the end of the 19th century, you have this idea that even atheist painter could paint religious subject, that religion was some part of human experience that could be treated by even an atheist. For instance, Manet was presented the Olympia with another painting at the same time in 1863, where it was called Jésus bafoué par les soldats, Jesus being beaten by the soldiers. So as if he could make the Olympia with a naked lady on a couch, or he could make also a very religious painting. Bonnat, Léon Bonnat also was making a Christ on the cross, and he was known as an atheist, and his painting was seen as a kind of religious painting by many people who find, like Renan also will write a Vie de Jésus and all this. At the end of the 19th century, you have this feeling that the religious experience can be dealt with from outside. And I think, in Gauguin, it's definitively that, because he wrote so badly about Catholicism. I'm sure he was not approving at all on this. But he have the naivety to think that his painting could be accepted even by some churches. He wanted to put it in a church, and of course he was refused, because there's a limit to what you can do in that direction. Real faith doesn't mean this kind of detachment, this kind of distance you take with your subject matter. And I think this could apply, I don't know if Lemieux tried to sell his painting to a church. I don't think, but I don't think he did it, and he's certainly less narcissistic than Gauguin, and he will have been more careful not to do this type of affront, let's say, of going to a church and then suddenly being refused. But mind you, he was able to enter in the chapel of the Automatistes, so why not in a real chapel? But I think it's interesting to see, this type of distance he takes with the subject matter. That's why I speak of irony. And the distance is translated, in fact, also pictorially in the painting by the fact that you are in a kind of bird-eye view, in his, as if you were above. And not only that, the church itself is open. A little bit, mind you, this is also a technique that you find in the old masters, like Giotto, for instance, the banquet of Herodotus, in which, to show you what's happening inside of the banquet, he opened the walls of the house, a little bit like Lemieux did here. But I think what is interesting, it is this point of view of distance with the subject matter, of non-involvement, if you want, of ironical attitude toward this, is translated in the picture by the fact that it's seen from above, from far, like looking down at it, like you see there. And Gauguin did that also, but with much more désinvolture. We know of, he was able of anything. You see, even representing himself here with a halo above his head, like le Saint Gauguin. You have no big complex of inferiority, let's say, like this. Okay. What happened at the time, I think it's important, if you put that in the Quebec context at the time, you could say that there was the beginning with the Fortes already of a certain division inside of the Catholic Church. You had, let's say, a magazine like Cite Libre was beginning to be published, in which some more open tendency, like Gérard Pelletier or people like that, were publishing articles. Mind you, inside of the Catholic dogma and all that, but much more critical of the society and of, let's see, the social aspect of the church. There was a book also called Feu la chrétienté, the end of not of Christianity itself, but of a Christian system, like civilization, if you want, done by Emmanuel Mounier, who was read by people at the time and all this. So you could say already in the church, you become to have this kind of distance and this kind of criticism inside of the church. And of course, in that space, irony is possible. The other thing I remember also in my own childhood, if you want, some church people become to be a little bit ridiculous. We all remember the entrance of Monseigneur Cardinal Léger, you see, when he became Cardinal and came in Montreal, and from the top of his chair, his pulpit in the Église Notre-Dame, say, "Oh, ma ville, oh, my city, you have dressed with purple to receive your prince," and all that. So, of course, we were students at the time, and we made fun of that. I was a perfect imitator of Cardinal Léger. We have also, in my parish, a priest, a Jesuit priest, was called Père d'Anjou. Very, very, and he was speaking of Lily Saint-Cyr. You see, she was a stripteaser, a girl, a good woman, a good mother, I'm told. Anyway, and she had this fantastic trick with a play of lightning. She transformed herself on the Venus of Milo, you know. So her arm disappeared, and okay. And this Father d'Anjou was describing the scene with so much detail and so much. We were sure he was going to the Gaiety Theater, you know. And again, we made fun. So this is, I tell you these jokes, but they are not jokes, they are facts. Just to give you a little bit this idea that we were beginning to take some distance with all that. So we speak of oppression and all that, but there was also some criticism done like this through humor or through jokes, or because also sometimes of the stupidity of the clerics who didn't pay attention to what they were saying. And that. Okay, so then you have this in Lemieux. I give you one more example of this, and I will send Gauguin somewhere else. Okay, this, well, no, ça va pas ensemble. En tout cas, on va le laisser Gauguin là. This is called a picnic. Okay, you see nuns with little girls, and they seem very excited, and of course one of these little girls here, I don't want to insist too much, is showing her tahat, I would say in Hebrew, and tusik or whatever. Okay, then this is another type of ironical statement. Okay, this at first sight seems to be very okay and everything, and then suddenly these little things. Because, of course, one of the big issues of Catholicism at the time, and still today, I guess, it is the sexuality. It is the, you see, there was a kind of very bizarre type of situation in which you have a church who was recommending natality at all costs, you know. You have to make as many children as you can, because that was called la revanche des berceaux. We wanted to be more numerous than the English. And so we wanted creating children like this, on one hand. And on the other hand, we were not supposed to have any pleasure, not to speak of sex, not to think of it, not to do it. The three things that we were always asked in the confessionnal, say, have you done it, and all this, sur vous-même, mon père, all these souvenirs, you see, that we have. This is a kind of crazy situation in which, on one hand, you have a politic of natality with absolutely, the sky is the limit. On the other hand, very severe about sexual pleasure, about anything of that nature. So I guess, again, Lemieux is touching gently, not with a big criticism like Bourdieu will do or thing, but through irony like this, he will do that. And of course, the more important painting of that period in which you see that is this one. I show you in parallel kind of preparatory drawing of this big painting, who is at the Musée du Québec now, and it's called La Fête Dieu. La Fête Dieu is the Corpus Christi celebration. Sometimes when I give this lecture, I feel like an ethnographer. I'm trying to explain kind of very curious tribe, you know, who have belief and all that. But anyway, I will tell you a little bit what this Corpus Christi is about. It is, it's no more done, unfortunately, because it was quite beautiful and all that. It's a feast in which you honor the actual presence of God in the host. So the priest goes with a monstrance. He's here under a canopy. And with this monstrance, and you have the host there. And of course, when he passes there, everybody goes on their knees, because the idea it is that it's not only a symbol of the presence of God there. It is God himself who is there. And this is, of course, a big issue with our dear friends, the Protestant. We don't agree on this. Anyway, there was endless discussion on this. But in Quebec, of course, there's no problem. They start from the cathedral, and they go to Notre-Dame de Victoire. So what he depicted, it's all the big procession, or if you want, the big kind of display of people like this that were for la fête Dieu. And you see also how the Quebec society was organized in many leagues. For instance, here you have the Sacred Heart Leagues. These were for grown-up men, for adults, but men only. Because at the other hand, you have les Dames de Sainte-Anne, Sainte-Anne ladies, just for older women. In between here, with their nuns, there's les Enfants de Marie, the children of Mary, the little girls, all dressed in blue, obligatory. And you have also the little crusader here. I remember my sister was a chef de croisée, and we have a little costume like this, and with crosses and all. Everybody had a banner, had a league in which to be. And you have one group which is quite curious. While I don't know how to say it in English, they were the Zouaves. What the Zouaves were, there was an army of a real army who was supposed to defend the Pope against the Italian nationalists who wanted to annex the Vatican. And so this is a very important cause, of course, and these Zouaves were practicing their craft here a lot. Very few went to Italy, but it doesn't matter. They stayed here, and they keep all their beautiful costume and all that, and Lemieux was certainly interested in their costume because he made here a special treatment of them. And okay, you have the Zouaves who are there in front of the canopy, meaning to eventually to defend it against the bad Protestant who could suddenly interrupt the procession. But okay, so you see a little bit what. Okay, now what is important to see, it is that Lemieux is in the picture. He's here in front of this building, and I don't know, you cannot read it where you are, but here it's written in big letters on this building, Jean-Paul Lemieux, propriétaire. And under, it's written, Taverne du Peuple. Okay? And in his door here, but again, you have to believe me because I saw the picture, it's written, fermé. Why? Because the tavern should not be open during the Corpus Christi procession. Come on. Near him, he put his wife, Madeleine Desrosiers, and nearby, a guy with a hat is Gérard Morisset. Gérard Morisset is one of the great art historians. It is a man to whom I have an immense respect because in my profession he's really one of the pioneers. And unfortunately dead now, but he's there near Lemieux. And you have also from time to time on the building certain names that are not neutral. Like for instance here on this, Hôtel Palardy. Of course, this is an allusion to Jean Palardy, who will be the author of the famous book on the furniture, the old furniture of Quebec, that some of you who knows it. And you have also F.X. Savard. You see, it's written there. Okay, Monseigneur Savard also was an author. So Lemieux make a kind of a wink of the eye to all the people he knew like this. He distributed them everywhere. But what is very important here to realize, Lemieux is not in the procession. He doesn't belong to the leagues. He is with Le Bon Peuple. So they are not against it. They look at it, but they are not in it. They are not participating. And again, you have this type of detachment that I was speaking of, this kind of distance, this kind of irony between maybe some aspect that he could not really criticize too openly, like, for instance, this division of sex between the sexes in the leagues. You see that the fact that they cannot mix, and the military aspect of all this also, the kind of ostentatious display of power in the street of Quebec. All this could be criticized like this gently, if you want, à la manière de Lemieux, not with confrontation, but through irony, again, in this very important painting. Okay. Lemieux, as an ironist, Lemieux also able to deceive people, to make a fake automatic painting, is interested finally in reality. I think this is, you will see, what I try to do is to go by step like this. So I start with this irony, and then I will try to show you that the other big motivation of Lemieux, it is the idea of being close to reality, having a painting that will reflect reality from close. For instance, he says, and then I quote, I will translate what he says, but I quote him here, is that painters should look around in the country where they were born. He says, I have difficulty to understand that a painter born in Chicoutimi and exposed to the north wind can paint like a Mediterranean. Before, the Canadian painter was isolated. He didn't travel. He was simply looking around him and expressed what he saw. The best work are always done in total isolation. See Ozias Leduc, for example. Well, this is not the best example, in my opinion. Ozias Leduc, okay, didn't travel much. I show you one of his paintings, not too good reproduction, but anyway, just to have an image on the screen when I speak. Leduc was not a big traveler, it is true, but he was very open to the art of his days. He was receiving magazine, reading a lot, and being in contact with every people. And Bordeaux, who knew him much more than Lemieux, didn't see him as a kind of isolé and working in isolation and all that. And even Lemieux himself could be seen in comparison with some of his sources. For instance, you have on the left a painting by Lemieux, which is called Portrait of 1961, and I put beside Paolo Uccello painting of, so a painting of the Renaissance, in which, of course, the type of presentation is very, very similar. So even Lemieux himself is not working in complete isolation. He was open to the heart of, I would say, of all times, and especially was very much interested in the early Renaissance. And you have few of his portraits like this who could be put in parallel with sources coming from the Renaissance. So, okay, people should look around in the country where they are born, but not exclusively to all tradition and all painting done before them. I think what is more important there, it is this idea of Lemieux, this formula of Lemieux, let's say, that a painter should express what he sees around him. This is exactly the formula of realism, I would say, always have been, both for pictorial realism and also for literary realism. This idea that the inspiration could come right away from around you. Mind you, there's a kind of trap there, because the realist writer or realist painter want to give you the impression that their art is not important, that what is important is what you see, the result, and the source. And what is in between, all their craft, all the tradition to whom they belong, all their culture and whatever they have learned, this is put like in bracket or make as conspicuous as possible that you cannot even notice it. This is, of course, the principle of realism, to make you forget that this is art. This is not art, this is the thing as they are themselves. And in Lemieux, I would see this in a way, there's a tendency to that, but also some restraint with this. And this makes it interesting, because in a way you feel that he wants to be close to the subject matter, to represent really what is around him, but on the other hand, he doesn't want to go too far in theatre, to have people with too much expression in their face, like you see here. It's a kind of very neutral type of presentation. He doesn't want to go in caricature, you know, or toward a more theatrical type of painting. He wants to use a lot of restraint. And the painting in which this happened for the first time, after the ironical paintings that I showed you before, is this one. It's called Les Ursulines. Les Ursulines, of course, is a group of nuns in Quebec City that were educators of girls. And So you represent them here in a very, very, I would say, minimal type of fashion in which you reduce all the little anecdotal aspect that you have in the previous picture, like La Fête Dieu, for instance. Now it's almost erased, as if at the moment when you want to be closer to reality, Lemieux feel the need to take some distance with that also, not to fall in too much realism, let's say, to keep a certain part for the art. Between the subject matter and the result, there is also the input of the painter. And this has to be saved at any cost. So one of the effects of this on the painting of Lemieux will be a kind of simplification. For instance, the personages who are represented here, you have no faces noted for the three nuns who are in the back here. Okay, we assume that one is reading maybe and the others are listening, but it's not clear just by looking at their faces. They have some notes of faces here, a little gesture of what I think could be the superior pointing toward heaven and maybe explaining that this one will have her nose a little bit up there. But a subject like this, who could have been very ironical before, is now very subdued, as if Lemieux wanted to avoid the trap of too overt type of realism. And he will be, indeed, you will see that the personage that he will treat, like here, Julie et l'univers, will hesitate between two solutions. One, it will be to present an individual, but without giving us too much particularities about her. For instance, this Julie, nobody knows exactly who she is. She's kind of personage like this. She's called by her first name. We don't know her second name. And she's isolated like this in a huge landscape, doing nothing with the arms on each side of her body like this, and just apparently looking without expression, as if all the elements that could make the painting more realistic in a way, going toward expression, giving us some idea of what the people think and what they are, and all this is removed. So one solution, it is to treat individual without giving us too much particularities about them. And the other solution is to treat types. Like, for instance, this one is called l'orpheline. And of course, with the system I was describing before of a lot of natalism, I could call it, you had a lot of orphans also, because mothers were dying, giving birth, and fathers were not able to take care of their too many children. And so you have this institution all over Quebec at the time of orphelinat, in which you receive these poor kids. Sometimes their fate was very bad, like this one doesn't seem too beautiful nor too intelligent, so they live in institution all their life, and all this was very tragic. But what Lemieux did now, it is to treat not a specific individual, but rather to show us a type, l'orpheline. You see. And the title also indicates this quite clearly. It's not this one or that one, it's one kind of generalized idea of what an orphan girl could be. So or he goes toward extreme individuality, but without giving us too much particularity, or he goes toward a kind of typology of a certain type like this one. And when you understand this, you could see, you could classify the portrait of Lemieux in one category or the other. Like, for instance, on the left, le petit frère convert, the little brother, if you want, and then la sœur blanche, the white sister, on the other hand. Even if you don't know this, again, you will see that many of his personages are religious, like this, or deal with religion. But more important, I think they deal with kind of people who express no revolt, no desire. And this, for me, make them a kind of very close to the type of realism that you have in the novel of the 19th century. Very often, the heroine, I'm thinking, for instance, of Middlemarch, for instance, Dorothea in Middlemarch. The heroine is sympathetic, is nice, and all this, but it's not a person who is able to revolt against her fate. She accepted, she suffered from it, she died with it, and she doesn't put in question the society in which she is. And in that sense, you could say there's a kind of a novel impulse in Lemieux, in which his personage, one after the other, they make types like this, they represent types, but when you see carefully which he take and which one he's treating, you will see that very often there are people who are representing no revolt, no desire, nothing to disrupt the society that in fact is so bad for them, impose to them this costume, this type of behavior, these people cannot get married and everything. See, all the society is tough on them, but they don't revolt, they accept it, and in that sense I think they are close to many heroes or heroine of novels of the 19th century. If you think of it, very often in these novels, the personages who are represented like evil or less good, who are put out of the novel in a way, are the more interesting one very often. And the real hero, the one who are presented like the main character, like say Anna Karenina, are rather dull people accepting their fate and living through horrible circumstances, but being more or less reconciliate with the society in which they are. And I think this is one of the reasons also where the character of Lemieux, when he makes this kind of personage painting, had pleased also a lot, because they are not threatening, they are not telling us to change anything, they are just sweet reminiscence, let's say, of a Quebec who doesn't exist as such anymore, but with whom you could relate, like, okay, this was sweet past that we had, and they are not challenging, let's say, the society, like, well, the automatists and the other will try to do. And I think this is important to realize that in this type of picture. Another one was called Tigus. Okay, Tigus, it's not only it's a first name, but it's a surname, in a way, of Auguste, I guess. And again, a little personage who will be presented here like what I call the individual, very particularized, isolated, doing nothing, sweet. Again, see, most of these personages there are a lot of women, a lot of children also, not many men, not many adult men, let's say, or défricheurs or something like that, nothing of that nature, hunters or things, no. Always these personages that in the society will be less threatening, if you want. Okay, this is, let's go. Anyway, maybe no. Sometimes, very rarely, you do have a picture in Lemieux oeuvre in which you could recognize the personage. Like here, it's a portrait of Émile Nelligan. Émile Nelligan was one of the famous poets of the beginning of the century, and this painting belongs to the University of Montreal. That's why we don't see it much. It's in the office of the rector of University of Montreal. And what he represented in behind is the Carré Saint-Louis that you have here in Montreal. And it's based, of course, on photo of Émile Nelligan. But habitually, you don't have that. You have Julie, Tigus, you have a first name, you have a surname, or kind of type. You see le frère Convert, la sœur Blanche, ou encore ici, l'enfant de cœur, tu vois, the choir boy. And, okay. And the other remark I want to do about this novel, or novelism, if you want, aspect in Lemieux picture, it is that not only the type of personage that he's interested in belongs to the novel category, if you want, but also his way of doing the painting is very similar to the one of a novelist. We don't know, of course, for all his painting how he proceeded, but for this one, it was called the Les Noces d'Or, let's say the golden wedding anniversary of these two people. He had described in a very precise term, let's say, how the painting was done. And he says, it started that way. He says, I was walking near my home, and I passed in front of the church, and then there was the presbytery there, and I saw on the veranda, on the balcony, the vicar sitting on one side, and then his housekeeper sitting completely at the opposite of the balcony at the other side. Both of them were there, looking in front of each other, and they were not speaking together. They are not supposed to speak. The housekeeper of a vicar habitually don't speak much because she's supposed to be old, ugly, and mute. So this is the perfect type for a... then there's no temptation. Everything is okay. Well, and so he saw this scene and he said, I must make a painting with that. And he says, then I change idea. And he says, I very often change idea like this, yeah. And he says, what happened? I decided to make, in the contrary, to take one of my cousin, the woman who's there, and to make kind of a depiction of two people, but feasting their golden wedding anniversary, so after 50 years together. And so then I would say the novel was more a social novel, becomes more a family novel in a way. Huh? It changed from one type of plot to the other. And mind you, it keep in both the essential, the alienation of these people, the fact that they don't communicate, the fact also that the cross is in between both of them. Huh? And also, he says that the woman seems a little bit deceived by life. She have a nice smile, but she doesn't have teeth, so that's why she closed her mouth like this. And he says, he described the man as a little bit, like an idiot in a way. He doesn't insist too much on his intellectual capacity. But what is interesting here, it is the process. Huh? It is a painting, you start with one subject, you change, and it's exactly like that, of course, that a novelist works. Huh? A novelist habitually could start with his own life, with his own thing, and will transform it like this, and will end up with a novel in which you could recognize yourself if you know him or not, partly, you know, this is exactly the same type of process. So not only the universe of Lemieux looks familiar like in a novel of the 19th century, but also the very process in which the painting is done is close to that also. So this is my third, I guess. So the Lemieux is ironic, the Lemieux who's playing jokes on his colleagues, and now Lemieux obsessed by reality, but a reality that he will find rather in types, rather in kind of typical type of situation, a little bit like in a novel. Okay, we'll stop here for a few minutes, 10 minutes, and my last things, I will say how Lemieux deal with the truth finally. Okay.